إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا إنه من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له الواحد الأحد الفرد الصمد الذي لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وحبيبه بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح للأمة فكشف الله به الغمة وجاهد في الله حق جهاده حتى أتاه اليقين فصلوات ربي وسلامه عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. يقول المولى في كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in the Holy Quran, O you who believe, have taqwa in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the manner that He is most deserving of and that is most befitting to Him subhanahu, and do not die except in the state of Islam. In the few minutes that we have today, I wanted to touch on a simple reminder. We see a lot of things happening around the world. We see a lot of atrocities. We see a lot of people struggling. We see a lot of calamities around us. And the first thing I wanted to point to is, what is our obligation here? Do we have to do anything? And for that, I'd like to mention two hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Unsur akhaka zaliman aw mazluman." The Prophet ﷺ ordered the Sahaba to help and to assist their brothers, whether they're oppressing or oppressed. And so the Sahaba were confused and they said, "O Messenger, we know how to support and to assist our brother who's being oppressed, but how do we aid?" And intrinsically in the question is, why do we aid? That is who is oppressing. And the Prophet ﷺ said, your help to them is stopping them from any form of transgression that they are doing. And so we have an obligation. If we see any form of transgression that's happening, we have an obligation to stop that transgression, and in that we are definitely helping the oppressed, inshallah. And the other side of the same coin is that we are also helping the transgressor by reducing the transgression that he is doing, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide them. We don't know. The second thing that I wanted to touch upon is, if we are obliged to do so, what do we get out of this? First of all, there is reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for doing any good deed. And إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. We know that if we are doing something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we'll be rewarded for it. But the specific hadith that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned was, whoever elevates a calamity from their fellow Muslim, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will elevate from them فَرَضَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ كُرْبَةً مِنْ كُرَبِ يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. Whoever elevates the harm, the struggle that their brother is going through, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment will elevate a calamity from him. And we all know, on the day of judgment, when the sun is, as the Prophet ﷺ, ala qudri mil, and the translation of this, or could be just an arm's length, and it could be a mile away, but either way, we're talking about an extremely hot day. We're talking about a day that's difficult. We're talking about a day that people are running away from each other. They're not recognizing each other. And so on that day, we really need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to lift from our shoulders the calamity of that day and any calamity that we can get on that day. And so it's our responsibility, it's inshallah an incentive for us to act and to help our brothers. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. In the second part of this khutbah, I wanted to touch on, okay, if the Prophet ﷺ ordered us to do this, and our religion orders us to help those who are oppressed and those who are going through difficulties, then, and we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us a great reward for this, you know, I'm not really going to dive into it, but I wanted to use the Prophet ﷺ's hadith as an example of what should we be doing. And the Prophet ﷺ said, that if you see something that is wrong, then change it with your hand, which means there should be action involved. We do something, we do our best physically, put of our own effort into making sure that this atrocity is elevated from our brother. And again, if it's our brother locally, I think there's a lot we can do, and there is a lot of that. So we should look into how we can physically help with the local people who are struggling and running into these problems. And for our brothers and sisters abroad, there is still action we can take. There are those who need financial support. There are those who are starving to death, and we can help them financially, for example. So I don't want to dive too much into this in the few minutes that we have, but the highest level and the first level is trying to do something about it. Putting our effort, our full effort in doing something about it. The second, the Prophet ﷺ says, that if you can't, then with your tongue, then at least say something about it. Raise awareness about it. Whether you're telling someone to stop or help them, or whether you're raising awareness about the issue to allow more people to become aware of this tragedy that is happening, and perhaps something that you couldn't do physically, someone else can, and maybe you get from that reward as well. And the last, and it's the least, is the Prophet ﷺ says, is that at least we hate it in our hearts. And that's the lowest level of Iman. And so this is one of the rare cases where we say, and last and least, that if we can't help, if we're not doing something to help physically or spreading awareness about it, the bare minimum is we have to feel that sense of hate, of guilt in our heart that someone is going through a hardship and we're unable to help them. And inshallah, that's not the case for any of us. Inshallah, there is something we can do. Again, there's physical means of help, there is advocacy means of help, and if we can't, for any reason, do any of those, then we have to at least check our hearts and make sure that we are feeling the pain of those who are feeling the pain. And we are hating when something wrong is being done to someone. Otherwise, qiyas and measuring on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, we have something wrong in our iman. If we are not really hating the fact that something wrong is being done, then there's something in our heart that we need to correct just to be able to fall under the وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. This is the least and the lowest amount of iman. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those who listen to things and follow the best of it. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who act and say and hate with their heart the wrongdoings of others. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elevate the suffering of our brothers and sisters around the world. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us a means and a sabab in the elevation of their hardships. عباد الله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك